Hi there. I had some friends asking me about the pattern I'm using to make the face mask that I'm making right now, so I decided to try to do a little tutorial to show you guys how it works. I found this pattern has worked the best for fit and being tight around the face where you need it to be, and so I've used this pattern slightly modified. What I did was actually cut on the solid line around 3 sides, and on the bottom I just cut off the seam allowance by cutting on the dotted line just to make it a little shorter, because I just felt like this part of the mask was a little bit too long for some of the people that were trying to wear it. And I think this particular pattern fits a lot of faces pretty well. So after I cut out my paper pattern, I actually took some freezer paper and was able, oops, that one's got strings all over it. I learned a little trick from a video where if you cut it out of freezer paper, you can then iron the freezer paper with the shiny side down onto your fabric, and it holds your pattern piece in place while you're cutting it, which just helps with stability and cutting out the pattern without messing it up too much. And then what I do is I layer 2 different kinds of fabric, 4 different layers. I've got 2 of the interior fabric and 2 of the outside. I lay my pattern down on my paper and iron it down to the top one, and then I'm able to use my rotary cutter or my scissors to cut out my 4 layers that I need to make this pattern. So after I cut out those 4 layers, this is what I have. 2 of these here that are going to be the outside of my mask and 2 that are going to be the inside of my mask. Okay, now I'm going to take this long curved seam and sew it on both pieces of my front and of my liner with the sewing machine. I actually serge this piece here when I'm sewing it, but I'm just going to use the sewing machine because that's what most people have. If it helps, you can clip it so that you're making sure you're keeping your layers together. So I did just about a 1/4 inch seam on both of those. Doesn't have to be too precise. My next step is going to be to take these 2 pieces and I'm going to open them out so I can see the right sides, and I'm going to put them right sides together, lining up my center seam. I'm going to clip these so that, again, I want to be sure I'm keeping my layers together at the right place. And now I'm just going to sew this top seam here. Again with a 1/4 inch seam. And my bobbin thread's running out. Okay, so like I said, I was going to sew this top seam. I just followed the curve all the way around. And again with a 1/4 inch seam, just laying my pieces flat here. For this next part, I'm using a pipe cleaner that's about 6.5 inches long. I just took a full length pipe cleaner and I cut them in half with some snipping shears. And what I'm going to do is actually fold in the ends a little bit just so that they don't poke out of the mask. And then I'm going to kind of fold it in half so I can kind of gauge where the middle of my nose piece is. And then I'm going to take my fabric and I'm going to open it out so that it's right sides facing out. And I'm going to put my pipe cleaner into my seam here with the middle of the pipe cleaner at my center seams and just kind of guide it in there. This is the nudgy part of this. I'm going to guide this in sort of right above my seam allowance, right along the stitching that I just did. When I come out to this side, you can kind of see that it's tucked in here pretty tightly. And again, you can, if you have some of these clips, they're really great to use. I clip it in there. I make sure I pull my seam out here on this side, and I tuck my pipe cleaner up in there on the other side. Give it another little clip. If you don't have the clips, you may be able to use little binder clips or something to hold it in place. what I'm going to do next is actually sew. I'm going to feel where the pipe cleaner is on either side, and I'm going to sew a little up and down over here. I'm going to go all the way across to the other side, and then an up and down over here. So I'm making basically a little sewn casing, so it's going to keep the nose wire in place. Okay. Go forward a little bit, backward a little bit, forward a little bit. Now I'm going to turn 90 degrees and hold my pipe cleaner out of the way so my needle doesn't hit it, and just sew as close as I feel comfortable to it, so that I'm not actually hitting the metal. I'm feeling over here for the end of it so that I can know where I need to stop sewing, and then I'm turning it 90 degrees, and again I'm going to go forward, backward, and forward. So now you've got a pipe cleaner that is not going to go anywhere. Whoops. Got a pipe cleaner that's not going to go anywhere, and it's encased with your stitches like so. Next, I have cut some twill tape into two 18-inch and two 15-inch strips. The 18 is going to be for around the top of your head, and the 15-inch are to go around your neck. And I've also heard of people using shoelaces for this. People are making their own fabric ties out of thin strips of fabric. I've heard of lots of different elastic choices. You could do this pattern with elastic. I'm not sure exactly how long. You might want to play around with that. And with these ties, I'm going to be just putting 2 on either side. With the elastics, you would want to loop it from, obviously from one side, from the top of your side to the bottom of your side, so it would loop around your ears. But you have to play around with whatever measurements might work for you. This one actually fits pretty close to the ear, so the elastic wouldn't have to be that long. But for this part of it, I'm going to turn this sort of inside out again. And you got your wire in there, so you're going to be kind of messing with that a little bit. But the sides should be pretty free and clear for you to sew. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your 18-inch, and here's our top stitching, right? Our top seam. You're going to take your 18-inch piece, and you're going to put it right up against your first seam, just so it's tucked right in there, if you can see that. And we're going to basically sew over this a couple times to make sure it's secure. Again, I'm using a serger, so I can just go zip and sew it down pretty quickly. But in order for the sewing machine to hold it in place, I like to go over it back and forth a couple of times. And what you can do at this time, if you want, is you can then you can pin this if you want, or clip it so that it holds it in place. And then at the bottom, you're going to take your 15-inch tie, and you're going to put it about a seam allowance away from the bottom. That way you can turn the corner and you're not going to catch this in the bottom seam, if that makes sense. Okay, so I'm just going to sew. I'm going to sew my seam on this side, and I'm going to do the same. Actually, I'm going to sew my seam on this side. I'm going to come down here, and I'm actually going to turn the corner. And what I want to do is catch half of my bottom seam in here as well. So I'm going to do like an L. I'm going to come down the side and across the bottom about halfway, just so I can catch my middle seam here. All right, so I went forward. I'm going to go back a little bit on this one. Forward again. Coming down to my second one, I can kind of feel where it is. So I'm going to go over it and back. And over it again. And once I feel like I've sewn past my strap or my string, then I'm going to turn the corner and I'm going to sew just past my halfway mark here. Give it a little back up so it holds. All right, so I've got 2 of them sewn in there. Now I'm going to take my longer one. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put it up close to the, so my 18-inch one is going to go up here, right up next to my original seam. And then I'm going to place my 15-inch one about, again, a seam allowance width about that far up from this side of my mask. And I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to sew down, back, down, keep sewing, down, back, down. I'm going to turn the corner, but then I'm only going to stitch a very little bit. I want to leave an opening of about, 2 inches, maybe 1.5 inches, because that's where I'm going to pull it through so I can turn it right side out. All right, so I've sewn down again this other side. I'm going to make sure my strings over here, my ties, are out of my way when I turn my 90-degree corner. And now I'm going to sew in just, about 1 inch. And then sew back a little bit. All right, so now I've got it sewn almost all the way around like this. And the lovely thing is my corners are connected to these ties, so all I have to do is pull on my ties, and it pulls my corners of my mask right side out for me. Beautiful. So now I've got just this little opening here, and I've got to sew that closed. So what I'm just going to do is, again, you can pin this if you need to, but I'm just going to I'm going to hold it tight like this as I sew across that bottom of the mask, just to close up my opening and just to give a finished seam on the bottom. Alright, so we've got an almost finished mask. One last step, which helps to kind of keep it fitted a little bit better, is to give each side one little pleat, like so. So you're just going to do like a little 1/4 to 1/2 inch fold on the side here, and we're going to sew directly across there. Same thing on the other side, a little bit of a pleat. And make sure your pleats are going in the same direction too. So I have it going down on this side, so I'm going to make sure that it's going down on that side. And there we go. Okay, so now you've got your finished mask with your ties on both sides, your little pleats, and your adjustable nose piece. So when you put this on, you're going to make sure you crimp it around your nose. You're going to tie these ones up around your ear, and my hair is a mess. And we're tying this one, oh, that one came off my ear. Tie that one at the back. Okay, and if you can get it fitted well, you should minimally or not at all fog up your glasses. So there we go, finished mask.